I was born in Hebei, and we moved to Assumption, so the parents will be closer to the residential schools, right? So my family was the few people that moved there first. So that's where the first maybe 4 years of my life was in Hebei, and the rest was in Assumption.
How old were you when you were in residential school?
Oh my goodness, 6, and I turned 6 in residential school, so 5. I was 5 when we were in there, and then 5. So 2 years I went to kindergarten and grade 1 there.
When you were growing up, you told me a little bit about some of the things you learned from your family, and you talked a lot about how you continue those traditions now. Can you tell me a little bit about what they taught you that you remember?
Mm-hmm. I'll start with the sewing. The grandmother starts you off with a small project to get you started in making crafts, right? So when I was about 5 or 6, my grandmother gave me a project to do. It was just beading on vamps, and she gave me a pattern. And what she did was she drew a pattern, and I remember she was mixing flour and water, make a white paste, and that's what she used to outline a design for me. And I found that fascinating. And then she said, "This is for you to do." And I thought, oh, okay. So, but I knew I've watched Mom and Grandma do a lot of beadwork, right? So I started, and there were a set of vamps. I worked hard to complete that, and to me it was beautiful because, like, if I can see it now, it'd be like it was ugly. My first beadwork, right? And Grandma made herself a pair of slippers with that, and I thought I was so proud of myself. And then I would help Mom with her beading from time to time. And when you have your first moon time, then your mother gives you a big project to work on for that week to just sit and sew. So that's the traditional teaching, right? And I had that from my mom, my grandmother, and my mom.
When you get your moon time, what other things happen traditionally? How do they approach the situation?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big moment in a woman's life.
Well, there's not a big ceremony, but the grandmother, like what my mom did with the sewing project, right? So they teach you what you have to be careful about, what kind of teaching that, they teach you about being a woman, what you can and can't do in that period of time, and to not touch anything that belongs to a man, a boy, like the male, right? And and in that time, you can do a lot of mending and beading, and just to have that quiet moment of reflection, and and learning to be patient, and just have that time to yourself, and just enjoy not being around too much going on, right? So yeah. It is.
When you were younger, did you find that learning about culture really helped you?
Immensely, yes. On each community, every individual has a role to play, right? And the elders, they're respected because they're the ones that taught the younger people about living in community, right? There's the elders, male elders that would teach the younger generations the oral stories, and same with the female, the grandmothers. They would teach the stories, the oral stories, and then how to make crafts, how to make clothing, how to make slippers, like moccasins, and what we need, and like gathering herbs, gathering medicine, all that, right? So that's the teaching we were taught. And like I said, every individual has a role to play. And some are taught to be people that do medicine, and some are healers. And then there are the artisans that did the carving, the beadwork, the fancy, I guess that'd be artisans, right? And then there are people that would do tanning, like moose hide and stuff like that. And then there's the tool makers. So whichever category fits our liking or what we gravitate to, that is what we're taught.
You were talking a little bit about what the flowers mean for some people who are creating beadwork. Tell me a little bit more about that. You just told me about being on the land.
There's not much protocol regarding how we do designs. Everything is nature-oriented, right? We don't define the land, it's the land that defines us. So we copy like flower patterns, or even bear paws, or wolf, bird footprints. Like everything, all the designs you see that it's nature-oriented, right? So this is how we do our designs. And it doesn't, like I said, we don't define the land defines us. So we follow what nature teaches us.
When you became a mother, did you pass on a lot of those traditions to your children?
I just have a daughter, Amy, and yes, I did. I've taught her to do the beadwork and the different crafts, and just show her all the different things that I was taught from an early age. And I also taught her the old stories, because we were prepared from a very early age. Earlier you asked me about the different roles, and I was telling you about the different roles each community member plays, right? The one thing that we're always told was from babyhood to about age 5 or 6, because the children see and watch everything around them, and they pick up and they learn. So that's the early years where the parents and the grandparents and siblings are taught to teach the young ones to be the best they can be, to be well behaved. So in that time also, what they did was they would tell the old stories, the oral stories, the histories, the myths. There's a lot of taboos, and that's also passed on. And you have to, when you're asking questions, the elders will tell you what is real and what is taboo, right? So that's the learning process. So from that, and then from age 5 through your teen years, right? You're still, that's where the parents and the uncles and the young, more maybe middle life individuals will teach you the hunting, the gathering of medicine, food, berries, and all that. So there's those are the teachings that each individual has to teach us, right? And then after that, that's the crazy years where you do all the crazy stuff. And that they say if you're lucky, you only do that until age 25 or 26. And from there, then you have you start settling down. You know what you're good at, what your life path is going to be. So we teach our children from an early age, this is what your life is going to be like. This is the life cycle that you have to be aware of. And you have to learn what's right and what's wrong. And if you make a mistake that doesn't feel right, you learn not to repeat the mistakes, right? So these are all the oral teachings. So yes, I've been teaching my daughter all that, and hopefully she listens.
You never know with children.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right now there's a lot of talk and a lot of buzz around the term reconciliation, and that means something different to absolutely everybody. What would that mean to you when, say, the government says they want to create reconciliation? Yeah, you take your time. I can cut.
Yeah.
That's a hard question, I know.
Actually, it's not a hard question. It's, if you use common sense, all this when the government said, "I'm sorry about what happened" and all that, that's a start. But the rest, as who's gonna get to work and get things started and say, hey, this is where we stand, this is what we need to do. It's not, I don't see much of that happening. So, no, it can be easy, it can be done. But is there funding for all the different things that can help the people? And like going back to what I told you about, every individual in a community has a role to play, right? If you look at the people, the homeless people on the streets, I always tell my daughter, don't look down on them. Don't say that they're no good. Don't say that they're bums. Don't call them any names, because back in the day, all of those people that you see on the street will have an important role to play. It's just that's taken from us, so you don't see that. So never ever call a person useless, a bum, or a drunk, because what you see is what was taken from them. So where do you think reconciliation should start? That's a question everybody should ask. And how do you give that individual their life back, right? So there's, like for me, it takes, whenever my daughter and I talk, she always gets mad, and for her, when people say, why don't the people just get over it? And she would get so angry. And it used to make me angry, but now it's like, well, you know what? If they refuse to learn to just accept and say, you know what? There's something in here for everybody to learn from. But is it gonna happen? I don't. That's a tough question, but for me personally, I've always had this thing with forgiveness. But once I started just forgiving people and forgiving myself for having to experience all this, even though it wasn't my fault to begin with, to forgive yourself and say, you know what, I can grow beyond that. Because in life, what our elders tell us through the oral stories is there's always a takeaway from stories, events what you live through, what you see. There's a learning process in everything. There's something to learn from everything. So for me, I always look for the takeaway. What am I taking away from this situation? What did I take away from the residential school? Everything has its purpose. And the one thing I've learned is, you know what? All I can do is forgive and learn what I can take away from this. And that just keep building on that. And you can overcome. And you can bring back what you're meant to be. And this is who I am. This is what you see. Through residential school, what they taught was they took away the most important human part of who we are. That's having empathy for others. You are never shown to have empathy for others by loving, and that unconditional love that parents give you, the grandparents, your siblings. You don't have that when you're in residential school. So if you've been there in a long time, you come out, you don't know how to show affection. This is what destroyed a lot of our people. My mom was in residential school. She was distant. I always thought my mom wasn't capable of loving. And my dad was the complete opposite. He was loving, he was fun, what we couldn't get, the love we didn't get from my mom, Dad provided that. And because he's never been in residential school. I grew up thinking that my mom hated me. Actually, when you're in residential school, it's a very rigid, it's like a regimental life that you live. Everything has to be structured. And that's how my mom was. Everything around you has to be so perfect. Nothing has to be out of place. And for me, I have this little thing above my little sewing areas. I'm the perfectionist. I don't expect my daughter to be one. That's a reminder for me. It's like I'm not going to repeat the mistake my mom did with me. So everything, like what I said, the takeaway from everything, I'm not like my mom with my daughter. Everything that I didn't like in my life growing up with my mom and in my community, all that stopped, because the cycle I started with my daughter is totally different. She's learning how to be traditional, all the traditional teachings she has. She has the teachings from like today's, like going to school here and everything. So she's got the best of both worlds and more.
A lot of the youth that I meet and a lot of young adults in their 30s and 40s are starting to find their way back to their culture, and I feel blessed to watch them bloom in front of my eyes. It's amazing to watch. And a lot of them are learning it through their children who are attending things like the Head Start program. What kind of advice or what kind of knowledge could you instill on those people who are trying to find their way back? What kind of advice do you have in regards to what you've learned on your journey of, I don't know, how you connect or how you've seen others connect?
Growing up, my dad always told us, be curious, always be curious. And not only my dad said that, but there were other elders that used to say, be curious, ask questions, find out. This is how we learn, and we keep learning, because every day you learn something new, right? So if you want to learn more about your like who you are, your traditional way of life, just learn to be curious, learn to just keep learning, and it's not hard. And another thing is, be a part of nature. That's where the healing happens, because in an environment like this, you don't have time to just be one with nature, right? And if you are just take a walk on a path that in the wilderness somewhere, even along the little creek here, it's just being one with nature. That's healing, and it opens you up to reflect on, okay, what changes do you want? And earlier when I said we don't define the land, that land defines us. That's why nature heals us, and that is what we're told as children. Be a part of nature, because it also gives you medicine. And when as young people, when you go on your medicine walk, where do you go? And in the wilderness, that's where you find when you find what you're searching for.